Okay, I think we're good to go. So hi everyone and welcome to our first online Kubernetes meetup in 2021. My name is Caroline. I'm a marketing manager at Kubermatic and I'm excited about this kind of special session tonight. Because we decided to make this a little bit more interactive instead of just rather having a one-woman show and just going through the presentation slide by slide. So we decided, to make this a little bit more interactive and to provide you with some space for your own ideas and contributions on how to get involved in open source. I'm very happy to welcome Divya. She will be guiding you through this session today. She will be moderating and answering your questions. So nice to have you here tonight. All right, before we get started, I'd just like to say a few words about Kubermatic. I think some of you might know us already since we are hosting a few meetup groups here. But for those of you who haven't heard about Kubermatic yet, just here now a rough overview. So at Kubermatic, we develop enterprise-grade software solutions and provide professional services and support to safely navigate and accelerate the cloud-native transformation. And in strong commitment to make Kubernetes as boring as possible, we want to empower IT teams worldwide to fully automate the management of hundreds of thousands Kubernetes clusters across any infrastructure. What else might be interesting? We are a remote first company with a team of nearly something over 60 employees at the moment across Europe and the whole world. But nevertheless, our heart is beating for Hamburg. So we have a headquarter based in this beautiful city in the north of Germany. We are very proud to be the number 6 of the top committers to the Kubernetes project. And what else? Our products are open source and freely available. So if you're interested, if you want to find out more, check out our GitHub open source projects. And I think that's enough marketing stuff for today. Now handing over to Divya to start the session.
So hello everyone, and I'm really glad that all of you could join today. And to be honest, I'm also a little shocked that so many folks are joining in because for a lot of folks it's late after their respective work hours, and I'm pretty astounded that folks have had the opportunity to join in and listen to me speak about this open source. But before I get started with my introduction and the session at large, I just want this to be as interactive as possible. There will be no slides, and that still is my promise. But should you want to speak and respond to questions or ask me any questions, please use the reactions button that is there, and there's a raise hand section there. Please use that, and I'll unmute you once you use that feature. So we are going to be talking about a lot of stuff, and this is to make it as interactive as possible, and everybody should have their opportunity to go ahead and be part of the discussion. So please use the raise the hand feature when you want to sort of chime in or start a sort of discussion on your own. That being said, those are just the ground rules. But coming back, I am Divya, and I work with HSBC in my day job. And over the last year, one of my primary goals was to get involved more in the open source community, primarily because I wanted to understand more about Kubernetes as a product rather than just using it and firing commands and learning how to administrate it. My interest was because of that. And fortunately, I also had the opportunity to be part of a larger ecosystem of cloud native products, which includes Litmus Chaos, a tool for cloud native chaos engineering. And my contribution journey was really not standard, because most of it did not start from, I mean, none of it actually revolves around coding or knowledge of programming languages, to be honest. Um, and why I personally was motivated to conduct this sort of a discussion was on account of the fact that there's a lot of interest around open source, and there's a lot of interest around how we want to get started. But there's, even with the amount of resources, videos, contribution guides, whatever, that's available on the internet, there's still no one-stop shop for everything. Uh, there is no one-stop shop for how you can get started based on where you are today. And hopefully, from this discussion, you're able to take away some pointers to get you started with the journey, and hopefully sustain that in the longer run towards making more meaningful contributions and building your own community of sorts around you. So that was my motivation for starting. I mean, for having this particular event. And if there's anyone who anyone who currently contributes to open source, who would like to sort of share their journey or share more their contributions, y'all can use the raise the hand feature, and I can allow y'all to unmute yourself. Okay, over to you.
Yeah, I just like to ask because you've mentioned that you work at HSBC, which is, I think, a couple of trillions worth of company and the group, and you adhere to a lot of regulations. And how did you convince your bosses that you would be able to spend working time on contributing to open source? Basically, that is my question. How to get the reasoning done once, yeah, I'm working at the big company as well. And of course, there are some challenges that, yeah, basically understaffing, so on and so forth, and how to, I don't know, build a case with your employer that, okay, the benefit overweights the cost of my working time, especially when I don't know, the team is in a bad situation or something like that.
Okay, that's a very good start off point. And honestly, that was something I was hoping to cover in the very first section, but thank you for raising it. So, to be honest, when I start off my open source journey, I really told my manager that I am involved, and I am planning to be involved in this particular community, because um, we were adopting Kubernetes, and we are the support team for Kubernetes at this point. So that sort of helped give me the weight to the point that I had to make to my own manager, saying that um, I understand that if you do not want me to sort of do this, but most of what I do is outside of my working hours. It's not during my working hours, but there will be some time spent. Secondly, I also managed to convince him in this way that we had an honest discussion about this, saying that we are going to be adopting Kubernetes, and I am interested in learning more about it as a product, rather than just, like I said before, hitting commands, creating clusters, doing the configurations. All of that is normal. Like, everybody can learn how to start up a Kubernetes cluster by just referring to a website. But what are the rational decision-making processes behind the conception of such a product? What makes it into the product, and why does it become a part of the product is something I wanted to understand. And honestly, when you are onboarding, we had already onboarded, and this support uh, was just had already been, sort of given to us. So when I said that I want to learn more about a product that we were already supporting, and I wanted to learn it about it from a holistic perspective, my manager was really okay with me going on board. And the very first sort of contribution was not even technical. To be really frank, I actually was part of a community day back in 2020, and that's before the virus actually. And I'd heard a lot about chaos engineering, and I was very interested. I was like, this sounds like something I'd really be interested in. So what happened was that I got interested. I started learning. I started figuring out stuff on my own machine, and I was like, I want to give a talk about this. And I went ahead and asked my manager. I said that this is not going to be doing anything with our with the stuff we support right now, but I want to demonstrate stuff that I am learning. And is it okay with you as a team of a huge company for me to go ahead and do this? So there was nothing personal. I mean, not personal. There's nothing that we work at HSBC that was spoken about. But I was able to convey whatever I learned as part of my journey in chaos engineering in that conference talk. So I spoke at KubeCon last year, and it's been one of the best experiences so far, even though it was virtual. But yeah, this was basically the sort of summary of how I convinced my manager. Does that answer your question? Just too verbose, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I've experienced something different. Basically, the reasoning of the manager basically was, I don't know, yeah, how is this would be helpful, to the company, especially when we are in the situation. I was hired as the software engineer, and of course I already had knowledge of the Kubernetes. It was planned to migrate, and basically the expectations from the managers are, yeah, you spawn the Kubernetes clusters with Terraform, so on and so forth, a lot of technical details. I already known that, yeah, and how to convince, especially when they see a lot of value of me working on specific business goals, and switch that to the open source, like how to convince. That was maybe that is a clarification of my question. Yeah, this is hard for me, at least to reason with the manager, because I honestly do understand their standpoint on that.
Absolutely. It's not that sort of it's not a sort of decision that we as individual contributors can foresee managers approving easily, but it takes a lot of convincing. And honestly, for me, it was not as difficult because we were already sort of starting off with Kubernetes support, so it was easier for me. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I am part of the community today, because without that support coming in from your management, it's not really easy to sort of get into open source contribution. It doesn't mean that I speak about stuff as what I do at HSBC, but it does give me the opportunity to work on stuff other than just my work stuff. So it gives me an exposure to other community related affairs that I wouldn't typically have exposure to had I just sort of gotten into um, my technical bubble. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very
Um,
much. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you.
So
Anyone
there's
else?
there's a couple of things I thought was important, Suresh here. Companies usually have some sort of a contract. A lot of large companies, at least, that you don't work on open source products. which are directly competing with the products you build. As long as that doesn't come as a direct competitor, you're okay to contribute and do what you want. That has happened. So you can actually sign those contracts that you're not working on projects or open source projects. I worked at Sun before the acquisition from Oracle. Oracle also had the same thing. Back while I was living in Prague, there was a group of engineers in the Prague office working on a open source microkernel, but we already had Unix as part of the main operating system, but they were not competing in the same category of supporting large hardware. But this was purely academic and to help students learn operating systems, contribute to projects, and understand how the open source code base works and evolves. So it's very important. The second part I want to know, this is just purely anecdotal evidence, so I'm not saying it's something which I know for a fact, but a lot of large companies like HSBC or any other large enterprises do have a vested interest in supporting open source projects when they embark upon larger effort in moving to a specific technology. It's important for them to actually keep it alive. If you don't have enough community people supporting those projects and putting code back in, you lose support for it, which means that it's a cost that you embark. Let's assume, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if you chose a open source framework to support your infrastructure and 3 years down the line, the community doesn't pick it up and you lose support for it, all the effort and resources you spent on it goes down the drain, which means you have to start looking at something new to have something alive. So that's also one reason why you choose wisely when you choose an open source project to adopt and also contribute, because, for instance, if you are using the Elk stack for your common logging infrastructure, look at what sort of file beat sources are being supported by the community, right? Which means if you're using those technologies to run your infrastructure, you know that those will stay alive and those are kept alive by the community members. So Elk stack is a very good example, in my opinion. Kubernetes is a great example. So it's not like every open source project is going to be a big hit, because it's like another startup, right? Sometimes it gets picked up, sometimes it doesn't. But you have to choose wisely as well. Then if you start contributing to keep that alive, it's a win-win situation, right? So it has to, you have to be a little more, or we all have to be a little more wise about what technologies we choose to support. Those are two things I thought I've noticed and maybe I could share.
That's an amazing point. Thank you, Suresh, for chiming in. Honestly, I completely agree with you, and I think what we choose to see more of is what actually gets promoted, and what sort of gets more visible in anywhere, not just open source. So that's something that I really think we should all put a thought to before going ahead and starting contributions as well. So yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Anybody else would like to ask any question or share details about their contribution journey?
I actually would like to ask one question about time. How you allocate your time to spend on this part-time or the hobby open source project? Because I started several times to get to know the project. Sometimes the project pretty big. Then I spend time to read this document, then to build up the local development, start my PR. But the problem is after a while, then I have to switch to for my day job or for my private life. I'm pretty busy. Then I come back in 2 months. Then a lot of things have changed. I have to start again. So this happened again and again. So sometimes I just quit. So I started the first month. Then I'm busy with other things, doing business trip for a very long time. When I come back to continue my topic, then I found out the community also evolved a lot. I missed a lot of the periodically discussion. So this is always my problem. So I don't know how to keep on track on this changes in open source communities, while you possibly only spend the time in the weekend or the nighttime to do this open source work.
Okay, so to answer your question, like I said before, I do not do it. I mean, I do part of it during my working hours because right now we are all afforded that comfort owing to work from home for most of us. So that's one thing that work from home afforded me to be part of, because it's possible to do both things for me at the same time. Context switching is one thing, but that's a completely different topic. The bit about contributions where you're not able to sustain because you're not sort of able to give the time commitment. I would say that, in my personal opinion, that even with the busiest of personal lives and the busiest of professional commitments, what works for me personally is to sort of understand where my strengths lie and where I can contribute the best. Again, that comes down to narrowing down where what you want to contribute to. Even within Kubernetes, there are a lot of things you could contribute to, and it's not necessary that you need to make a code contribution, or you need to make a documentation related contribution, or you need to do XYZ to sort of valuably contribute. Every small contribution counts, and it's honestly a matter of directing your focus to what you would like to do, and going ahead and slotting out time, maybe across a week, as to how you would distribute time across a week for that particular contribution, and getting it done in that slot, yeah, as opposed to just free-falling and expecting it to work according to your convenience, because it never works that way. And having a sort of rough idea about the bandwidth that you can allocate over a week, and slotting the week into um, different time slots where you can contribute makes sense in the longer run, because every day it's really not possible for us to be online 24/7 checking stuff on the work Slack, the Kubernetes Slack, the work WhatsApp, everything. It's not possible. It's too much information overload for me personally, and I'm sure that's the case with everyone. So if you actually speak about time management, it's more about distributing your work in such a way across the week, or across a period of time that you intend to contribute, and you think you'll be able to get it done by that time. Slot it, direct your focus onto that, and don't spend extra time on that after that particular time slot gets done, because the more you expend work, the more you expend time on that particular outside of that particular slot, the more you are going to go deeper, and then it'll be outside of that slot that you've set for yourself, and you are going to definitely not consider it sustainable, and it's going to be easy for us to drop out. It'll be very easy for us to drop out and feel unmotivated because we're not able to live up to our own expectations of contributing. So the best way in this case is to slot it out across a period of time, judge what you're firstly going to do, and then go ahead and do it, because there's honestly not a lot you can say, because for personalized guidance and all of that, it's very difficult, given that no 2 days are ever going to be the same, and no, forget about days. I don't even think the hour that has gone and the hour that is going to come is going to be the same. So it makes sense for you to have a very rough plan about what your focus is, and to sort of uh, have a specific time in a day or a couple of days across the week for that particular thing only, and then you can have more focus in that area, and go in a T-shaped manner to allocate things. I mean, towards developing focus on other things. But first, I think getting focus in a particular area is absolutely essential. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So you mean you have to focus on one area, then you just try to find some time slot in your spare time, then see how can you contribute it. I think that makes sense indeed. Yeah.
Maybe I have a small addition. Well, what I would like to share with how what personally worked for me. Basically, a calendar that you dedicate, I don't know, the time slot that if you have 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes, but every day, every work day or whatsoever, and as early as possible in the beginning. So you woke up, you get a trigger that you have to do something, and if you've done that, you already feel better for yourself that you've done it in the morning, and you have more energy during the time. And more, it's the same like with I don't know, reading a book for 1 hour per day or something like that. Basically, you would just get more and more disciplined with that, and you would be able to, I don't know, dedicate time slots in the evening, and you would be adhering to your schedule. This is what helped me. I don't know.
So that means you do that in the morning, you mean?
At least I don't know how it would be the best for you. This is at least what helped me personally. Like it worked for me. I have a goal that I don't know, I dedicate 15 minutes or 30 minutes, not for contributing to open source. It's a completely different subject, but doing it every day and at the same time helped me to develop a schedule. And then you, I don't know, if you invest 1 hour per day, so it's 7 hours per week, so you would reach, I don't know, hundreds of hours in a year, so on and so forth.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So if we do know where we can allocate and where we choose to allocate, we probably all have stumbled on this problem as to where to begin, because that's the problem with Kubernetes, or actually any open source project, to be honest. The ecosystem is largely not I mean, it's documented well. That is not the problem, but the problem is more around how to navigate it and where to begin. So when I started off, I had a lot of help with respect to the navigating and hand-holding into a particular community. So I spoke to a lot of members and understood my strengths. I mean, strengths I had to ascertain for myself, but understanding where I could effectively contribute was something that I ascertained after speaking to a lot of members. And I think that's something I would like to understand. If folks are actually contributing, is there some sort of how to begin, where to begin dilemma that y'all have faced when starting off?
Could I say something, please?
Absolutely.
Yes? Okay. Hello, Divya. You have introduced yourself as a senior sysadmin at HSBC. Are you talking for HSBC or for yourself right now? Because I have not understood that.
So I I work at HSBC, Demetrios, if I'm getting the name correct. But I'm nothing of this is affiliated with my job at HSBC. I am speaking from my experiences with regards to the open source community contribution and how I personally managed it. HSBC, so fair disclaimer, I should have given this earlier on, fair disclaimer. HSBC is not sponsored this. HSBC is not responsible for my views. These are my experiences and these are my opinions. And these are what I have gone through. And I hope to share, and what I aim to get out of this discussion is better clarity for all of y'all to get started with open source community contributions. Does that clarify your stance?
Hi Divya, I also have a question over here. So can I ask now?
Sure, please.
Yeah. So, so once you get started with contributing to the open source, and there could be some situations where you face difficulties, or there is a problem like you have taken up some task and now you find it difficult to finish it off. So how do you communicate with the members or with other colleagues in this project or in this open source community thing?
Okay, that's a very good question. And honestly, one of the things that I was looking to cover. So when I hit a roadblock, and honestly, when I started off, I hit a roadblock pretty soon, given that I was pretty much a newbie to a lot of the things we were talking about. So what I understood and what I have experienced personally is that when you are working on an issue, there will be a person who has actually opened the issue and is responsible for sort of coordinating with the assignee to get the work done. And coordinating not necessarily in the sense that you will be asked for a particular date and time when you're going to be completing it, not in that way, but the person that I reached out to in all of the contributions that I have done is the person who has actually raised the issue. And it can be over the PR, but normally I find it more effective that we get on board the not necessarily a Zoom call, but we have that one-on-one interaction either on Slack or whatever the internet, I mean, whatever the chat format your open source project uses. So that is one thing. Second thing is obviously PR is a very good way to interact, and getting on board the Slack channel is also great. But if you want a wider attention, I mean, you want a wider area of attention and you want more people to understand and help you, my best bet would be to join the meetings that are there for that particular focus group. So every issue or every sort of focus, every issue that is raised on GitHub, specifically for Kubernetes and Litmus Chaos, the two projects that I work on, they are tagged to different special interest groups or focus groups, as you may call them, within the community. So, and all of these communities and all of these groups have calls that are held fortnightly or weekly, and we are very welcoming to to newer contributors, so that they have an open forum to discuss about their problems, about their roadblocks. And the people on the call are obviously more experienced folks who can guide them in the correct direction. So that is another way that I personally found helpful when I started off, because like I said, I was completely new to Kubernetes, and moreover, I was really new to GitHub and the version control system, because I was not a developer, so to say. I did not use GitHub in my day-to-day job. So the learning curve for me was very steep, and a lot of the guidance that I got along the way was by these methods that I just told you. Does that make sense? Does that clarify your question?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, when we take a task or something, then we are not on our own self. There will be someone who is more coordinating and who will also help in throughout the path. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that typically is the case, because folks who open issues, or folks who are actually responsible for making any sort of changes to the existing packages are typically more experienced folks, and they are the ones who are responsible for tagging an issue and labeling it across the special interest groups, or whatever that I was talking, the groups that I was talking about. So that is done, at least in the two projects that I'm part of, and I've also noticed it in Python. So I think that's a very widely used format across open source projects, that people have better visibility as to where and who to reach out to. So you're never quite alone in this regard, I guess. And
Okay.
that's, yeah.
And one more point, that when you started, you said that you want to understand Kubernetes as a product and not, okay, also like a technical terms. So what do you mean by the Kubernetes as a product? Like, does it go in the direction of marketing or promotion, something like that? Or it is more into the how it integrates with the system?
No. So honestly, what I wanted to understand was, when we are talking about every Kubernetes version, there is a decision-making process that goes on behind the scenes. That's not very well, um, I mean, it's well documented for folks who know about it, but it's not so widely available on the as common knowledge on the internet. Like, it's there on GitHub, all of it is there, but it's just not something that everybody is aware of. So what I wanted to understand was, when a Kubernetes version is released, what are the considerations that go in, and what are the decision making processes, what are the exact coordination processes that go into effect once you decide that that particular release is going in. And I wanted to understand it from a holistic perspective, because I have been part, in my previous job, of release support administration team, and I was curious about the product as a whole. So that is one aspect. Second thing, obviously, community is something I was curious about, because it's kind of stunning to me that there's no contractual obligation here to contribute. Whatever you do is voluntary. So I wanted to see how the governance and how the policies around such community, functions. Because it's very easy when you have contractual obligations, that stuff is there in black and white, and you know that you are obligated to do XYZ in this time at this place, and you are expected to deliver so and so. But when you are actually not doing, when you actually have no obligations whatsoever, this is all of just a voluntary exercise. How does that work? And that's sort of, those two are the main reasons that got me, started on my contribution journey. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
I mentioned.
And maybe, sorry for, I don't know, asking too many questions. Do you participate in the Hacktoberfest from the DigitalOcean? Basically, it is an event that happens each October, and you basically optimize your GitHub repositories for the first-time contributors. Like, do you participate in that, and what's your ideas on the subject?
So I personally have not participated in that because, to be really honest, I was aware of it as a thing that was there, but I was not sort of. I had a major imposter syndrome that I would not be effectively able to contribute, and it sort of never goes away. It's something I've learned. So Hacktoberfest is something I've never really contributed to, and my plan is to actually to start contributing last year, but as fate would have it, I flipped onto the other side because I was part of a project that sort of had Hacktoberfest, was participating in Hacktoberfest. So you could say that I participated, but from the other side. So I didn't get a chance to contribute, but I was one of the folks that was there on the reviewing and approving side for pull requests to the project. So I was on that side. Unfortunately, did not get to contribute to anything. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, I've participated both as a maintainer and as a participant in Hacktoberfest. This year was a little bit funky because there was a strong spam presence just before it started. And so we had to change the infrastructure slightly. As a maintainer and a participant, it wasn't that hard to change to accommodate that. I personally, I come from an open source background. I worked for Red Hat for a long time. I'm very privileged when it comes to open source participation. It is my job. But I think that Hacktoberfest is a beautiful initiative especially for beginners. It's very inclusive and welcoming, and I was really impressed with how, especially this year, the adjustment was quickly made, quickly addressed, and the rest of Hacktoberfest was very chill.
Yeah, it was super smooth after that adjustment was done. So I completely agree with that. Although the initial phase of it was like a lot of spam. And by spam, I don't even mean like the spam you receive in your email box. I mean, mailbox on Gmail or whatever. It was like a truckload of spam unloaded on you on one single day. And all of us wake up to really huge amount of notifications, let's say. So yeah, that after the regulations were put into effect and the tweaks were made, I think it was perfectly fine after that. But yeah. So apart from the Hacktoberfests and apart from the open source programs that open source communities that I mentioned, has anyone been part of any programs or any how do you say that, programs really, because I don't think there's a better word for that. I know that most of the programs on the internet that are there very widely that are widely actually available and widely publicized are aimed at students, but have you all been fortunate enough to be part of programs that are not, like mentoring programs?
I mean, I'm one of the people who fixes those complaints when something does go wrong in a couple of different projects. But it's not uncommon for there to be bad experiences in a mentoring situation. But that's true also in private sectors and everywhere. And hopefully, by the way, if you're getting involved in open source for the first time, one of the signals you can look for that indicates kind of a safer space or a not as safe space is if there is a code of conduct. If that code of conduct doesn't exist, proceed cautiously. I've seen projects that did not have a code of conduct that were perfectly fine. It tends to be smaller projects or projects where they just didn't think it was important and everyone knew everyone. But at a certain point, when a project gains certain attention, it can become necessary. It's like a car with no seatbelts. You want the seatbelt there when you crash, but otherwise you're kind of annoyed that you have to wear this thing all the time. And I get it, but yeah, hopefully if you are in a situation where you don't have a mentor who is unresponsive or worse, that you know who you can talk to within the project, usually of the maintainers list or the founders list is a good place to go. But try to get really factual. Like if you're have a mentor that's unresponsive, say something along the lines of, I was expecting a response within a week via email. This is the contact we agreed on, rather than just saying, this person never talks to me, because then people are better able to communicate and get to the source of an issue. Because everything's online, you know, you kind of forget there's a person behind that text, someone who's going to read it. And so I think it's important to remember that you're all people and to communicate above all else.
Also, I think it's very important to pick the proper chunk of your first contribution or something like that, so you are not spending, I don't know, weeks of work and then trying to convince everybody that you've, I don't know, reinvented everything. But yeah, this is basically my observation, that you have to have a mentor or a reviewer who would later, I don't know, merge everything to the master and yeah, help you to navigate how to maybe fix a bug or fix a documentation or something like that, making a first step, and then yeah, you will be doing second step, third step, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. I think having, like Rain said, having that code of conduct is extremely essential when you are going on a larger scale, primarily because it designates a safe space, and it also sort of gives you the reassurance that, you know, if things go wrong, you will be held liable. That bit is there, and it's a nice thing to feel that sort of safety when you are contributing to something that's also very voluntary, and there's no other obligatory, you know, obligations written down and in the form of a contract or whatever. So that sort of safe space is extremely essential, and having a mentor, like an official mentor on a program, is, I think, one of the most valuable things. Any of the programs that are there, like even GSOC, Google Season of Docs, Outreach, whatever, any of them can sort of provide, even Hacktoberfest for that matter. But they are pretty good contact points, and should you not know really who to speak to, like again, Rain really well chipped in really well, that maintainers are always great folks to speak to. So feel free to reach out, and the maintainers list is normally pretty well maintained and updated, so you should not have a problem finding that on the GitHub repo for the open source community that you work with. So when we speak about if mentoring programs or anything in general, there's this common I mean, imposter syndrome is one way to put it, but there's this common thing that goes on in our heads that we're not really cut out for contributing to open source because we don't have XYZ knowledge. And that's something I battled with because I, as aforementioned, was not really proficient in programming. And being a systems administrator, senior systems administrator for maybe 8+ years of my career, it wasn't a great place to start from at that point because I had basic programming knowledge from my graduation years. And imposter syndrome is unfortunately not the greatest thing to have when you are trying to start out something new. So how I'm curious if folks are contributing right now and have gone through that. How did you all sort of get through this whole situation?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So to rephrase it, whenever we start contributing, at least in my case, what had happened was that in my years of being a systems administrator, I did not have the confidence to go ahead and contribute something in coding perspective or to make a direct contribution to the code base, if you may. And I was apprehensive if whatever I was even contributing would be of any value. And that was pretty hard to overcome because it took a lot of self-reflection. That's one thing, but it also, helped what helped was actually understanding how it fit in within the wider perspective. But I'm curious to understand if anybody else has sort of started their open source journey and felt the same way, and if they have, what are the steps that help you feel otherwise.
Yeah, so there are again, anecdotal disclaimer. Imposter syndrome is definitely real, and tech in general has been or is still very unforgiving for women in particular, not just, but in general it is. So there are the another disclaimer, I'm not an active or very good contributor, but I have used a few techniques which I have noticed it's helped people who I've been in open source communities with. Find partners who are champions of, who know you well, or try to, there are two things. One thing is attending meetups regularly, so you gain some familiarity with people. And then the second part is filing issues with technologies. Start writing good bug reports. That gives you a lot of, it builds a reputation on how well you understand things. So as a user, you start as a user, and then you build reputation on filing good bugs. So because bug reports are really the only, sort of pros available on how much you know about something. And then for women in particular, I think it requires a group of people who they have some sort of support group which they can depend on because of all the reasons you spoke about, and I heard before. It can be unforgiving in terms of how you get judged, how you are judged to a different standard, in particular, all of that. So those are important. So my recommendation, or my things, what I've noticed is have somebody that can support you and start probably with writing good bugs so that you can build some reputation.
Yeah, also to probably extend to probably extend on what Suresh was saying, yeah, I think another thing that we can do is look into the GitHub repository, look for issues, and look actively how people are solving that. I mean, that is something which I always go through, even though I'm not an active contributor, but when I'm writing like different controllers on top of it, I'll see how people are doing it. So it's like on GitHub, you can keep your identity anonymous, so it's not something which you need to feel too much ashamed of, like doing something of a contribution. But to start small, you can look into how people are filing bugs, how like there are almost like 2,000 open issues on like the Kubernetes repository as of yet. And if you go and just start clicking and looking into how people first of all are filing those bugs, and then how people are doing different pull requests to solve those different bugs, I think that gives you a lot of insight of how to solve different issues into the community. But it's also a good idea to get an overall understanding of how Kubernetes or any open source project for that matter works under the hood. And then of course, like as you said, Divya, that how just pick your pick your area of interest and then contribute accordingly. Yeah.
All right. I want to ask a question from another perspective. So this meetup is about how people get themselves ready to join open source projects. But from another side, I want to ask, not so many open source projects, even a famous one with a lot of people participating in the project, are organized in such a way that easier for new member to adopt the task, get started in the project. So I remember I have seen some projects have this new member document, but normally, let's think a project in company. Normally they have this complete onboarding process. The documents, and you assign mentor, then you have some either exercise in your local development, how to build a local development environment, and you have some exercise to start with, then you can ask some questions and Q&A sessions with mentor. But I don't usually see open source project has such a thing. Like, as I said before, only a few open source projects I have seen, they have this like new member document. So where you can start. So sometimes I ask, how can I start? Then answer just simply say, oh, we can pick up some issues. Start with, then you can do this, then that. Then I think this is not it's not so. I'm sorry. This is not so easy for new members with different background to participate, to join the open source project.
Absolutely, I think that was one of the roadblocks I faced when I started off, and that was not also that's also because I think when we start off, to be honest, we rather than diving deep, we dive in a breathwise fashion. We try to look at as many things as possible rather than sort of looking into one thing. So when I started off, I made that mistake. When I started off Kubernetes, I also wanted to do 10 other things. And I was like, okay, this also sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. This sounds interesting. And honestly, all of them had contribution guides. All of them, like all of the projects I've worked with so far, have had new contributor guides there in place, and they tell you how, what, and what is the I mean how and what basically in terms of the GitHub pull request process. And they also tell you what exactly you could start contributing to if you are relatively new. Documentation is like the safest bet across projects, because a lot of projects maintain their documentation in Markdown. A lot of them. I'm not saying all of them again. A lot of them maintain it in Markdown, and that's why it's the lowest entry level barrier across most projects. So documentation is one thing, and even for documentation, most of the projects have a sort of contribution guide available. So taking a look at the contribution guide definitely helps. Secondly, reaching out to folks in the community is extremely important, because when you are starting off, you do not have the knowledge of how stuff works, and nobody is expected to come with everything. You're not expected to be equipped with everything on day one. So one of the things that I think helped me was, reading through the contributor documentation after actually someone pointed it out to me. I did not find it myself, because I did not take the time to actually invest, and I not invest the time really to actually research and see if there's a documentation for it. And once I read through that, things were a little simple. I'm not saying, I went from 0 to 100 on the very first day, but stuff was easier once I started, once I read through it, and once I figured out where I could effectively contribute. But with respect to entry level barrier that does exist, because even with documentation you're expected to know Markdown, and Markdown, I'm not sure if at this point in time anybody doesn't know, because most of us use Markdown as in some form or the other at some place. So I think that's something that most of us are aware of. So documentation is one thing that I think has the lowest entry level barrier, and reading contribution guides and speaking to folks helps you understand where helps lower that barrier further down. I mean, that's what worked for me. I'm not sure if anybody else has had a different experience and could probably chip in from the audience. If you do, please raise your hand.
No, actually, that echoes what my normal recommendation is, which is for people to read the getting started guides and actually follow the instructions and give feedback on how they're wrong, because in open source, they're wrong. Because it iterates so quickly, there's always a typo, there's always a mistake, there's always a release that's incorrect, a link somewhere. And filing bugs against documentation is an excellent getting started in an open source system. But yeah, back to you. The original question is, what can a project do to help lower that barrier for people? Those getting started guides are great. A mentorship program is awesome, but it's usually not something that you need to formalize until your project gets larger. And by larger, I mean to where you have at least more than one maintainer. If you're a maintainer with your own repo that, only your grandma looks at or whatnot, you don't need a mentorship program. But if you're Apache, you better have a maintainer, a mentorship program. So I wouldn't worry too much about those formal programs initially. Documentation is key. I've got to run, but thanks so much for this session, Divya and Kubermatic.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Sorry for interrupting now, but we are running out of time. Thank you very much all. Thank you, Divya, for sharing your experiences and for providing so much insights with the community. I think that was very helpful. I think people still might have a lot of questions on how to get involved in open source, how to lower the barriers. I'm quite sure, Divya, they can reach out to you directly to go through their open questions with you. But for now, we need to stop the session. Thank you all for joining, for contributing, and for making the most out of this interactive session. That was quite nice. Yeah, have a nice evening and see you all soon. And by the way, we recorded the session. I will upload it to our YouTube channel, so you can watch it whenever you want to again. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Nice evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.